Hare Krishna. This morning I'm going to read a verse from the Nectar of Instruction, because originally we thought of having some katha that helps us tune into the mood of Radhashtami, which is tomorrow. So speaking a bit about these topics. So I'm jumping in today because the original speaker cannot. So therefore also today I'm going to chant the mantra for glorification of the six Goswamis. I think you all are familiar with it. If you just know, you just can chant along. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipuno Sadharma Samstapako Lokanamritakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako. Unfortunately, I don't have the English word by word. I rather have it in German, so we leave it at that. Hare Krishna. So we're going to read from the Nectar of Instruction by Sri Rupa Goswami, the 11th shloka, which is the last shloka of the book. And the Sanskrit, or the verse, is a bit difficult prose, so I'm also just going word by word, and then we go to hear the shloka. Krishnasya, of Lord Sri Krishna, Ujjayi, very highly, Pranaya Vasati, object of love, Prayasibhyaha, out of the many lovable gopis, Api, certainly, Radha, Srimati Radharani, Kundam, lake, Cha, also, Asyaha, of her, Munibihi, by great sages, Abhitaha, in all respects, Tatrik Eva, similarly, Vyadayi, is described, Yat, which, Preshtahi, by the most advanced devotees, Api, even, Alam, enough, Asulabham, difficult to obtain, Kim, what, Punaha, again, Bhakti Bhajam, for persons engaged in devotional service, Tat, that, Prema, love of Godhead, Idam, this, Sakrit, once, Api, even, Saraha, lake, Snatuhu, of one who has bathed or bathed, Avishkaroti, arouses. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Of the many objects of favored delight and of all the lovable damsels of Rajabhumi, Srimati Radharani is certainly the most treasured object of Krishna's love. And, in every respect, her divine Kunda is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. Undoubtedly, Radha Kunda is very rarely attained, even by the great devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. If one simply bathes once within those holy waters, one's pure love of Krishna is fully aroused. Purport. Why is Radha Kunda so exalted? The lake is so exalted because it belongs to Srimati Radharani, who is the most beloved object of Sri Krishna. Among all the gopis, she is the most beloved. Similarly, her lake, Sri Radha Kunda, is also described by great sages as the lake that is as dear to Krishna as Radha herself. Indeed, Krishna's love for Radha Kunda and for Srimati Radharani is the same in all respects. Radha Kunda is very rarely attained, even by great personalities fully engaged in devotional service. What to speak of ordinary devotees who are engaged only in the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti? It is stated that a devotee will at once develop pure love of Krishna in the wake of the gopis if he once takes a bath in Radha Kunda. Srila Rupa Goswami recommends that even if one cannot live permanently on the banks of Radha Kunda, he should at least take a bath in the lake as many times as possible. This is a most important item in the execution of devotional service. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in this connection that Sri Radha Kunda is the most select place for those interested in advancing their devotional service in the wake of the lady friends, Sakis, and confidential serving maids, Manjaris, of Srimati Radharani. Living entities who are eager to return home to the transcendental kingdom of God, Goloka Vrindavan, by means of attaining their spiritual bodies, Siddha Deha, should live at Radha Kunda. Take shelter of the confidential serving maids of Sri Radha and under their direction engage constantly in her service. This is the most exalted method for those engaged in devotional service under the protection of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes that even great sages and great devotees like Narada and Sanaka do not get an opportunity to come to Radha Kunda to take their baths. What then to speak of ordinary devotees? If by great fortune one gets an opportunity to come to Radha Kunda and bathe even once, he can develop his transcendental love for Krishna exactly as the gopis did. It is also recommended that one should live on the banks of Radha Kunda and should be absorbed in the loving service of the Lord. One should bathe there regularly and give up all material conceptions, taking shelter of Sri Radha and her assistant gopis. If one is thus constantly engaged during his lifetime, after giving up the body, he will return back to Godhead to serve Sri Radha in the same way as he contemplated during his life on the banks of Radha Kunda. The conclusion is that to live on the banks of Radha Kunda and to bathe there daily constitute the highest perfection of devotional service. It is a difficult position to attain, even for great sages and devotees like Narada. Thus, there is no limit to the glory of Sri Radha Kunda. By serving Radha Kunda, one can get an opportunity to become an assistant of Srimati Radharani under the eternal guidance of the gopis. Jagna Baladev Subhachadevi ki jai, Shri Gaunitai ki jai. Om Ajnanatim Randasya Kananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Dharati Svabharantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagishayasya vadhane lakshmiryasya chavakshasi yasya te hridaye samvit tam narasimham maham bhaje pralada hridayaladam bhakta vichavitaram sharatindurachim vande parindra vandanam harim. Of the many objects of favored delight and all of the lovable damsels of Rajabhumi, Srimati Radharani is certainly the most treasured object of Krishna's love. And in every respect, her divine Kunda is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. Undoubtedly, Radha Kunda is very rarely attained, even by the great devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. If one simply bathes once within those holy waters, one's pure love of Krishna is fully aroused. So tomorrow there's the celebration of Vardashtami, and actually this whole topic of Sri Radha and also her Kunda, the relationship with Krishna, is the heart piece of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. At the same time, it is also a very confidential topic. So it is like, on one side, like the highest aspiration for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, but it is also carefully guarded, in how it is taught, how it is like brought to us, also by Srila Prabhupada, because it is something one has to mature into spiritually. It's not something one can access by whim or by one's own aspiration, simply, I want to hear about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Because actually the sadhaka who is not on a liberated platform is strongly advised, or is like instructed, he should not hear. He should not try to absorb in that which he is not qualified for. And there are two types of qualifications, the qualification of the speaker and the qualification of the listener. Both are important. But even more important is the qualification of the speaker, because if the speaker is pure enough, if he can really come from a transcendental platform, the listener gets purified sufficiently. So, but also the speaker the listener has to be qualified to receive properly, to understand. So these two things are there. And if you look at the nectar of instruction, we see that Rupa Goswami, in the first verse to the 10th, he starts to instruct carefully, piece by piece, how to get to this highest platform. So it's a very condensed form. 11 shlokas compared, for example, to the Bhagavatam, it's not much. But we can look carefully what is the first instruction. It's about controlling mind and senses. Then it's about understanding what is favorable or not favorable for devotional service. Then it's about how to relate to devotees, and so on. Then like more instructions, until it comes to the point, okay, this is like the essence of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We also consider to be Rupanugas, followers of Rupa Goswami. And there, the Madhurya Rasa, or that which is like the loving relationship between Radha and Krishna, this is the central, the heart piece. Sorry, Mataji, can I ask you to please not chant japa during a lecture? Oh, thank you. So there's also an interesting pastime I found in the Prabhupada Lilamrita. Because Srila Prabhupada, when he was traveling in India first, like he also, of course, he had to visit many people, many places. There were many families, or also businessmen, Vaishnava families who invited him to stay. And of course, so many exchanges happened, and one I would like to share. He was with one Mr. Balu. He was a famous businessman. And he also happened to be a devotee of Radha Krishna and his wife as well. They also had it's understood, their own temple. I assume in their house they had like a whole temple room and so on. They worshiped Radha Krishna. And the devotees noticed that the deities were often dressed in black. And they were asking Mr. Balu, why is this? And his reply was, because they are so radiant, so Falcon, they have to dress them in black, otherwise I can hardly look at them. Was his response. And then another thing they observed is they didn't pay prostrate obeisances like we do to the deities. And they explained because they feel like they are the father and mother of Radha and Krishna, so it's inappropriate. Like it's not how can the father pay obeisances to the son? So they assumed themselves to be in this kind of level of Vatsalya Rasa, or parental affection on the transcendental platform. And at one evening also they came to Srila Prabhupada and asked him to please recite Rasa Lila. And Srila Prabhupada refused by explaining that this is for liberated persons, he says. And Mr. Balu was also a big businessman, family man, and so on. And Srila Prabhupada, let's have the quote here. Prabhupada replied that the Rasa Lila, being the most exalted spiritual topic, was meant only for liberated souls. Only one completely free of material desires, Prabhupada explained, was fit to hear the Rasa Lila. Then quote, no Swamiji, Mr. Balu insisted, my wife and I are very keen, you must recite Rasa Lila. Sometimes when you hear the old, also, I don't know if it's nowadays still the same, but you hear recordings when Indians then like like being in this kind of exchange of sometimes it seems even they yell at each other and like being really kind of demanding, like, yeah, no you do, no you say. And they demanded from Prabhupada to speak on that topic. And Prabhupada responded to this one. Again, Prabhupada described the exalted position of the rasa dance, repeating that only when one is completely free of all material attachments to wife, family, home, and money could he become fit to hear of Krishna's rasa dance. Mr. Balu then folded his hands and politely repeated, Swamiji, my wife and I plead with you, please recite Rasa Lila. Then Prabhupada replied, well, you may be fit to hear Rasa Lila, but I do not feel that I'm qualified to speak it. So kindly ask someone else. I find it very instructive how Srila Prabhupada behaved there, how he was very clear, guarding actually that which is most confidential. This is important because also Krishna is not cheaply to get. You cannot just like force yourself into the intimate, aspects of Krishna. You must be invited practically. It must be revealed. So it's a whole process. And the liberation part is interesting. What does it mean actually to be liberated? Prabhupada says this is the essentially the qualification that you even can. It's not even only the Rasa Lila. In other places it explained also in general the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, also with cowherd boys and so on, family. They're considered very intimate and friendly, not only that which is with the gopis. So on one side, we should know about that because, as I said, it's the heart piece of our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. At the same time, we must also understand what's our qualification for absorbing that more deeply. Prabhupada, of course, he did write the Krishna book very early. He came to the West with the Bhagavad Gita and I think the first two cantos, or was it already three? No, two cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But then he very quickly wrote the Krishna book, which is a summary of all the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, because he was concerned having not enough time. So he didn't want to have left that out because this is where we aim at. So it should be part of our knowledge. We should understand it. But be careful to really to not prematurely try to enter in some kind of rasa, like with these devotees, considering yourself, oh, like I have these deities now, and then I'm the father, and my wife is the mother of Krishna, and so on. It's so-called sahaja-ism, like being actually not fit, but thinking yourself to be fit to that. So this is usually like given to you by the spiritual master, like who also sees the nature of the disciple and then can tell him, okay, now you're fit. Back in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, there was still a process going on, I think Sita Pranali, if I remember correctly, where like the spiritual master reveals even the spiritual identity of the disciple. But also this was misused or like in a very cheap way, being exploited by sahajas or like cheating gurus. So this whole thing is very highly guarded, as we see when we Prabhupada also, if you read the instructions on it. So speaking of that, I would like to focus a bit on the liberation part. So we have actually very big blessing. Our way to liberation is made more easy in this age because we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani. And we understand like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the golden avatar, golden complexion, and this is because this is the complexion of Srimati Radharani. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita is also explained the two types of love that we can think of. The love, the so-called love, we must say, in the material world, which is compared to iron. And it is also self-centered. It is based on the body, and even if there is selflessness and affection and so on, it is still based on material conceptions, usually. But then the love of the spiritual world, the transcendental love, is compared to gold, very sublime, and is characterized also by, first one is like very it's selfless, but is also in depth in terms of experiences, so-called mellows, and it's like endlessly a deep thing that the soul can experience in relationship to Krishna. So, and of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us the chanting of the Maha Mantra, and we have there also Radharani in a more, in the form of, what was it, the invocative form, Hara, is like addressing Srimati Radharani in this way, the female aspect of Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, also Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the introduction already, he mentions there are rasas in Krishna consciousness. There are the 5 main rasas. One should know about that, but he doesn't elaborate, because then the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita gradually guide the sadhaka through coming to that what we call the platform of transcendence, or Brahmabhuta. And in Bhagavad Gita 1854, it is said, Brahma Buddha prasanatma na shochati na kankchati samasarveshu bhuteshu mat bhaktim labate param. When one has reached the Brahmabhuta platform, the level of transcendence, it is said one becomes immediately very joyful. One is liberated. I quote here, one who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments, na shochati, and also he has never desires to have anything, na kankchati. These 2 things are not there, free of material desires. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. So on the level of being practically on the Brahman platform, we call transcendence, from there actually true pure devotional service starts. And Brahmabhuta, this prasana atma, means also there's another translation, free from the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. And therefore also fully joyful, because there's no more covering from material energy. We reconnect to our spiritual nature, which is in itself joyful. We say, we also Satchit Ananda, or nature is that. And Srila Prabhupada in this purport explains, to the impersonalist, achieving the Brahmabhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. And the definition of pure devotional service is Anyapilashita shunyan jnana karmadya navritam anukulyena krishnanu shiranam bhaktir uttamam. So this most sublime pure devotional service is characterized by also the absence of fruitive activities, monistic jnana, also from any selfishness, and simply the intention to please the Lord is the central item. One wants to give oneself fully to Krishna. And here it says, this means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation, called Brahmabhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. I'm thinking about that a lot, this verse, I like to read and think about it often, because it says something very important, that Krishna and the souls, the jivas, they truly reciprocate on the transcendental platform. There's no really, from a material perspective, to truly interact with Krishna. Of course, he makes himself available to us, like also through the deities, it is said, because we are too covered. So the Arja Vigraha accepts food, accepts worship, accepts this and that, But actually the pure devotional service between Atma and Krishna can only happen if you're back in this on a transcendental level, because Krishna doesn't relate to the material energy. It said he has no contact to it as well. Of course, and at the same time he has. It's a bit complicated. So yes, there it is to be understood. One first has to mature into this stage of what is called liberation, not impersonal liberation, of course, that we become one in the sense of Sayuja Mukti, merging with Krishna, but like becoming in nature again one, and still we will be individuals. But then it's possible to enter the rasas of Krishna. And there's also a development. It's that the first rasa is the Shanta rasa, which is called neutral love, which is a bit of a perhaps a bit misleading term. Neutral means persons like devotees on this level, they are self-realized, they're not identified with matter anymore, but they're not particularly inclined to the devotees, not particularly averse to the demons, and also they don't have a sense of possessiveness toward Krishna. So that's why it's considered a bit neutral. They like admire, like in worship, and they experience like intense ecstasies as well. It's not something to be underestimated. If you read these descriptions, it's also very powerful state. And from there, like through the association of devotees, one can develop more and more. So in this, when there is truly appreciation of the transcendental nature of Krishna and one on self-realization, and then the service rendered to the Lord is something of which can be called pure devotional service in the most essential sense. We understand we practice pure devotional service in method and also in mentality, because that what is given to us by Srila Prabhupada, what we do and with what attitude we do it is considered pure devotional service if we try to be without personal selfish motive. So, but then there's another level if it's really coming from the transcendental consciousness. Also, this is if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, we have also like the devotee Arjuna, and he is a Sakya, or Sakya Rasa, a friend of Krishna, and also one of the 9, process of devotional service is like Sakyam, being friends with the Lord. And we can understand it in 2 ways. Of course, it's like being friendly towards Krishna and accepting Krishna is our true friend because he's there for us, cares for us, etc. But it is different from having a Sakya Rasa as Arjuna has it. Because Arjuna relates to Krishna, first of all, personally. They meet there like in touch. And it's on a transcendental platform. They relate to each other directly. So this is happening only on a liberated platform. For us, we cannot artificially be friends. Similar like these, maybe the family that think, oh, we are now parents of Krishna. This happens differently in the spiritual world. So also there it's already understood, also with Arjuna, like even the Mahabharata is considered like for the less intelligent people. But there's also a lot of depth, like we see like how Krishna relates to his devotees, and we can learn from that. So but also Pada Sevanam, this serving the lotus feet of the Lord, we can understand as, of course, we serve the deities. We can, if you are like initiated and qualified, we can touch the deity, serve it, bathe them, and so on. But what Lakshmi does, like Pada Sevanam, is something happening on a transcendental platform with a transcendental body of the Lord in themselves. So there's always like different considerations in that regard. And so our aim is in the first place, to try to advance to the platform of being free from a material conception of life. Brahma Bhuta Prasad Manaso Chatina Kankchati. And also Samasarveshu Bhuteshu, trying to see each living entity equally, is not possible as long as I'm still in a material conception of life. I just cannot. It will be, you don't even, it's like automatically, we will see differences. We will have preferences. We will have sympathies, or like antipathy, I say, like in English the same. I don't know, but being averse, for example, and or in liking something, disliking another thing, and seeing different quality, because what we can perceive primarily is the body. And of course, parts of the mind, when there's expression of who is this person, when we see characteristics, when it is expressed to us. But the actual Atma, we truly perceiving that there is a spiritual living entity in this body, that's another story. And to regard like each living entity as equally valuable. And I'm not talking about human beings, it's about animals, plants, etc. Like to really have that vision. That's a very matured state of spiritual consciousness. To actually see beyond material coverings, subtle as well, and really have a sense of there's another Atman, and we are existing on an equal platform, Brahman. Because then there's no distinction anymore, like I have this type of body, I have this kind of development, I'm more developed, less developed, or more beautiful, less beautiful, and whatever, So that is something we are supposed to practice. And essentially, though, what is on our way to that is to develop love. Not just love for Krishna, of course, but love for all of his creatures. Because Srimati Radharani also as well, she's the embodiment of love. And it's also described how she's always eager to get also the other souls to get engaged in Krishna's service. And what is love? Love is characterized for once, it's of course as caring. It's like being in a mood to truly embrace another being. It's about also appreciating and deeply caring, but it's also about giving. Prabhupada says love starts with giving something. That's what devotional service is, serving others, with love. That would be the idea. Because what can happen then is selflessness. The contrary is like, one can say selfish love for oneself. It's more like a lust or like a egotism. To say, it's what I need, what I want, and I'm primarily concerned with that, and others maybe should serve me, which is a natural tendency of any conditioned soul. I'm not free of that as well. I include myself totally in that. At the same time, I can understand that actually the more I learn to serve and give, the more I can come closer to what we call devotional service. If it's truly in my inner wishes, in my desires, in my attitude to, I give this to you because this is what I'm meant to do by Krishna. Because we all have given some qualities, talents, and nature, which is called in Dharma. And the idea is, pass that on practically. Don't keep it for yourself or serve yourself with it only. It's about you serve others with it. Whatever this is, like if you're, let's say, a good helper. For me, it's my profession. I'm a therapist, coach, etc. And then this is something where I have some equipment that I can share with others to help them in various capacities. And I realize more and more, the more I can do that. Simply being able to truly do that is in itself rewarding. That's something important if you can understand that. We sometimes think, if I give only and give only. But what is about me when it's my part? And of course, we got to take care of ourselves as well. But we can understand that we are truly on the right path if we serve and feel nurtured by that. And if I feel like, by doing the service, by giving that, actually I also get automatically, because this is like in itself a rewarding thing to do. Because Krishna has the desire, he equips each of us with things, and we are his property, we can say. The body, the mind, but even our very selves. And we are meant to share that. And try to be of service to others. Of course, in the spiritual sense, of course, that we also help others to develop their Krishna consciousness. Also, we develop our Krishna consciousness, or be an example for others, like who are not Krishna conscious yet, who feel then by our character, by our way of being attracted to learn more about Krishna consciousness, for example. So this is something where we can develop love if we learn to give. Recently, I heard an interesting quote from Jordan Peterson, which resonated with me. He said, maturity, like a definition of maturity is there when another person becomes more important than yourself. And I was thinking about that. It's like interesting. If you look at, like, because he's a psychologist, clinical psychologist also. If you look at developmental psychology, as babies, when we are very small, we are extremely self-centered naturally, because we first have to learn about ourselves, get to know this body, and then it's about us and what we need. There's called a narcissistic phase, which is different from pathological narcissism in a person. Like, Freud coined that term, because it's about, I love myself the most and what I need. It's about, I see everything as my property. It's so self-centeredness. But the more we grow, we also learn, there are others? They also have needs. There are boundaries. I cannot just, take care of myself. And so it makes sense to understand the more you mature, means that you consider others in what they need and yes, as something important or even more important than yourself. It's called transcending yourself, moving beyond your selfish needs. And it's interesting to consider it maturity, because yes, if I'm more just stay like in this kind of sometimes really childlike, stubborn, but I want this and it's mine, then it's not development. It's like stopping from development actually. So also in different philosophers or different psychologists, they will say the same thing, that at some point growing means to grow out of your, let's say, comfort zones, out of your, let's say, selfish considerations, and be there for others. Because it's also what human beings are. We need others, and it's also for us helpful and helps us grow if we learn to share ourselves with others. It's like, maybe we can compare it like, let's say, maybe take a flower, which has in itself a potency for certain nectars. What if it would stay closed? What would the insects do? And so who would have the honey and so on? So, but actually by doing that, like it shares itself with the world. And there's actually also sometimes in interactions between plants and animals, simply because of that interactions, they fully develop. So also we actually develop more when we try to be of service to others, because then our potential is used and it can grow, it can expand. So it's an important way to look at that. And speaking of potential, if we also consider the gopis and Srimati Radharani, which is the chief, there's a list of, I think, 60 qualities, if I'm correct. Srimati Radharani also has 60 essential qualities listed. I don't know if it's 60, maybe it's a different number. But some of these qualities are, for example, they are expert musicians, the gopis. They can also sing nicely, play instruments, in this way please Krishna, singing his glories. They are also expert poets. Well, Srimati Radharani is expert poet and also actress. She can also enact things, she can perfectly entertain Krishna. She can do things like out of flowers, making a blanket, and many other things, cook all kinds of things, and also there's some particular water pots, I guess. I forgot the name, but she can play on them also to make a pleasant sound and so on, etc., etc. So there's a lot of capacity to serve, and this develops by serving more and more, for others. So we can have that in mind, that actually essentially what is Srimati Radharani is about is service to Krishna. In this way also experience the highest bliss, the highest rasa. All right. And because we, as long as we are on the material platform, we have an identity problem. We do not identify necessarily as servants, as we say. Let me try to quote. Yeah, Gopi Bhartu Bhara Kamalayo Dasa 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 Nudasa. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out that he is the servant of the servant of the servant of those who are servants of the gopis and their feet, So there's a lot of talk about nowadays identity politics. People have all kinds of ideas. They are confused about who they are more and more, and they invent more genders and all kinds of things. But the core confusion is about that you are this body from our perspective. So whatever you think you are materially, and no matter you fight about it, even if you're like in tune with your biological nature, which is very important because it's also in sattva, being in balance and health, simply being in tune with what you have. But also this is illusion. What to speak of creating even new identity concepts. But essentially our identity concept that we try to develop and realize is that we are eternal servants of Krishna. In whatever body we are, in whatever gender we are, whatever ethnic or like a race background we have. So this is the important identity. No matter in what body we are, that we understand and identify as eternal servants of the Lord, who are supposed to get back to the spiritual world where we have like there our spiritual identity, our Nitya Swarup, eternal form. So this should be our aspirations, and we can come closer to that by in full consciousness and with loving intent, give ourselves into service to Krishna and the devotees, but also other people, because essentially everyone is a devotee, those who have acknowledged that and those who haven't. So any living entity essentially belongs to Krishna. Right. Yes, so in this way we can maybe tune in then and tomorrow celebrate Radhashtami, understanding the greatest servant of the Lord to be Srimati Radharani. Hare Krishna. Are there any comments or questions, remarks?
You mentioned about this 5 rasa that Francis did for and that this is transcendental. But I heard that we are recommended first to start with dasya, the approach as dasya. But is dasya not already also transcendental, because like Hanuman is like transcendental dasya with Krishna?
Yes, I mean, if you speak of rasas, we must understand a transcendental mellow, as described in our philosophy, provides that we are free from the material conception of life. So these rasas are experienced on a spiritual platform or in the spiritual world, but also, of course, can be overlapped wherever we are situated. Because the nectar of devotion describes that Rupa Goswami, how one can gradually develop to the Brahmabhuta state, being free of this material conception, and then rasas can awaken by association, by revelation, by Krishna's mercy. And Shanta is at the beginning of that, because Sri Rupa Goswami also argues, even because some acharyas don't acknowledge Shanta rasa as a rasa, sometimes it's also confused with impersonalism, which is actually nonsense, because how can impersonalism have a rasa? Rasa means loving exchange or like ecstatic exchange with Krishna. But he says even if they don't acknowledge it as a rasa, they must at least acknowledge it as a basis for all the other rasas. Because for some there are just 4 rasas, main rasas. So the dasya rasa that is experienced in Vaikuntha is based on that one has a transcendental body in which one is relating to the Lord. Of course, we try to get in the mood of a dasya, servant. But if you read the descriptions, there are particular servants there with a particular service installed, so to speak, in Krishna Lila, having their particular function they fulfill eternally, practically. And we have a variety of services based on our body. They can also change the more we develop. And what is our essential spiritual identity, we hopefully will be revealed to us at some point. So, if you speak of Dasya Rasa, Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa, and so on, this relates to souls on the transcendental platform who have overcome the material conception of life.
So before that, we don't have actual relation.
Yeah, it's true. Like the understanding, do we have then actually before that really a relationship? Yeah, it's called dormant. And I think that's what we also struggle with in terms of faith, because we think it, we don't experience it, right? We learn the philosophy and we try to meditate on it, but we don't experience our transcendental body. What to speak of seeing the soul, realizing our spiritual nature. This is already a struggle, right? We look at ourselves and we try to grasp somehow or other what is the soul, but we can't. It's elusive. It's our mind and senses, we cannot grasp it. Yeah, and then that's the challenge for us as neophytes or someone on the very lower levels of devotional service, to with faith and patience. That is what also Rupa Goswami instructs in the Nectar of Instruction for the items that are beneficial for devotional service. One item he mentions is that there's patience needs to be there. Utsahan nishchayata iryat tat karma pravartanat sangatyagat sato vritte satbir bhakti prasityati. Being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to the regulative principles, abandoning the association of non-devotees, following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. So this is where we are at, and the patience is sometimes challenging because we have to practice, and more on the basis of having faith in Shastra and Guru, but not on the basis I have realized that it's available to me. So I think that's something when you say, yeah, we don't have a relationship, right? Yeah, it's not awakened, it's not fully developed, it's still dormant, but we move toward it. Yeah, it's a challenge. But we have it, but we are not aware of it fully. We just can understand essentially servant, yes, but what that means in particular for me as an individual will be revealed in time, hopefully. We have to be patient and enthusiastic and endeavor with confidence. It's interesting also with confidence, it's also that we understand that we take seriously what are the acharyas teaching us and have faith. Okay, they come from the real, from the transcendental platform, and if I follow that, I will attain that goal. Yeah, we must keep going. Anything else? Good, then Srila Prabhupada ki jai.